afternoon and welcome to ZTN. Today we're live and our discussion is the participation of young women in governance. Now, this broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV Network in partnership with the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe. My name is Candice and I will be taking you through today's discussion, which is really to focus on the participation of young women. Is there a need for them? Is it important? Are they interested? These are all questions that we will be asking and all will be getting answers. Now, if you're joining us, please make sure you chime in on our conversation. And the platforms to use are, of course, Facebook at Zim Papers Television Network, and on Twitter at ZTN News. We will be taking in your contributions a bit later on as the show progresses. Now, I have with me a panel of women who are very passionate about all things women empowerment, and I'd love for them to introduce themselves, starting, of course, with the lovely lady on my left.
Thank you, Candice. My name is Virginia Mwakalyelye, the Chief Executive Officer from the Zimbabwe Gender Commission.
Hi, Candice. My name is Charity Chaturuka, and I'm from the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe Young Women's Forum.
Thank you, Candice. I'm Rovimbo Chiveri. I'm from Female Students Network Trust Programs Department.
Zugulu. I am from Women in Politics and Peace Building. I chair that. And I'm also from National Peace Trust Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Mrs. Holland. Now, before we get into today's discussion, just a brief background. Now, since independence, Zimbabwe has signed and ratified a number of regional and international instruments that call for gender equality in the various spheres of life. The 2013 Constitution also provides strong legal framework for the promotion and attainment of gender equality and women empowerment. Now, despite the existence of all these supportive instruments, we are lagging behind in the advancement of the participation of women in governance. Women and girls in Zimbabwe continue to face several challenges in the political, social and economic spheres as a consequence of gender inequalities and imbalances. But let's take a look at this for background.
Zimbabwe has signed and ratified a number of regional and international instruments that call for gender equality in various spheres of life. However, in spite of the existence of these supportive instruments, the country has not fared well in advancing the participation of women in governance. The Southern African Development Community (SADC) Gender and Development Barometer reveals that whilst women's participation in governance is still below agreed benchmarks, Zimbabwe's citizens seem to believe the country is doing well in that regard. The discrepancy between the perceived and actual realities in relation to the participation of women in governance is not by accident, but is founded on a systemic and calculated maneuver by politically dominant males to open the space when necessary and convenient for them. Whilst there have been some moves to bring about parity in numeric terms, there is a glass ceiling for women in terms of how far they can go up the governance ladder. Women have not been immune from all the problems that emerge, especially during election time. There has been an endless cycle of women victimization when it comes to voting or being elected for political office or within political parties. The political climate since 2008 has been relatively calmer. Women have been more demanding of their rights to equal participation and representation, and the 2013 Constitution has provided a mechanism for realizing these ambitions. Furthermore, the fractured nature of the political parties seems also to offer an opportunity for women to take advantage of this and forge solidarity alliances across political party lines as a getaway to governance positions. The new Constitution of 2013 introduced a gender quota which provided for reservation of 60 seats for women based on a proportional representation system. This discussion, sponsored by the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe, will help us all understand to what extent women are contributing in governance issues and how their ascendance to governing positions will assist to solve the economic and social challenges bedeviling the country.
All right, ladies, so we've had the background. Now, Virginia, let me start with you. The framework is there, the instruments are there, political parties seem to be saying the right things, but our numbers are dropping. From your perspective, what is happening? Where are we going wrong?
Thank you very much. I think just as we have had in the background, as a country, we've done very well in terms of coming up with the right legislative framework, a very progressive constitution that clearly defines that we, as a country, we value gender equality, women empowerment, that outlaws discrimination, that even goes forward to actually come up with or to request government to come up with affirmative action measures to ensure that previously vulnerable groups can actually also be represented. I think one of our biggest challenges is that we need to have a situation where the legislative framework, meaning our laws, our policies, our constitution, are in tandem with what our institutions are doing, both public and private. Are they also following the letter and spirit of the Constitution? So as we are talking about our ministries, as we are talking about the private sector, as we are talking about even within civil society, do their policies also mirror what is intended by our Constitution? And then more importantly, as a people, as a country, do our citizens value gender equality and women empowerment? Do they believe that women have also got a right to be represented? So we have moved in terms of the legislative framework. We have moved even in terms of what people say. I think you'll have heard that what we are hearing from institutions, individual and also institutions, is that they are committed to gender equality. But is the part of the cultural translating what is being said to action? This is where it's actually a challenge, because as you have noted that in the last elections, we actually found ourselves going backwards on the situation in 2013. And that just creates a problem and rings alarm bells. So we need to be able to ensure that not just in terms of the law, not just in terms of what people say, but in terms of how we live as a country, we give effect to our Constitution.
All right. Now, Mrs. Holland, you work with women, especially from the grassroots level. And as has been pointed out, one of the issues is very cultural. What are some of the things that you observe when you're dealing with these women in terms of even just their demeanor when it comes to issues of governance and taking up these positions?
Right. I think one thing that Zimbabweans don't realize is how far ahead we are. If there's a world barometer to be put up, the difficulties Zimbabweans are having are global. They're not just here in Zimbabwe. And the tragedy for us in Zimbabwe is that we have been pushed into a hole because of the sanctions and the isolation, and people have been cut off from the rest of the world, and they are not able to measure exactly where they are at and how they are at. I'm coming to answer your question. When I walked in here, I was so happy to see that with all the things that are going on around the world, we've got young kids that I can take to Sydney, I can take to New York, I can take you to London, and I can go to sleep, and I know you'll take care of business because you are global. At the grassroots, it's not different to what you find in the rest of the world, because I work with grassroots communities around the world. Right now, I am what is called an ambassador for Support Life After Torture. As you know, I'm a torture survivor. And in Zimbabwe, the number of torture survivors is 300,000 to 1 million. And that, when I say that to people, they all jump in their chairs because they don't know. Yet for us, those torture survivors at the they're deposited at the grassroots. There are people who've done very well, got involved where they got into torture and been deposited there. So when you talk about the grassroots, don't have in your mind that it's a population that is a certain way. It's diverse, there are different needs, and that moves me to say to you, the solution is for resources for assets, for all the things that are available in town to be available at the grassroots. So the economy, the society should reorganize itself for climate change by ensuring that we utilize the land that we have in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And I think that that answers that what people in the city require is what people in the rural areas require. So all the resources should just be evenly divided.
Distributed.
Yes.
Okay. Now, should these resources be evenly distributed, as you say? Do you think this will encourage more women to get involved? How will this stimulate women when it comes to them taking up more key roles in terms of how they lead their communities, lead their societies?
If you still remember Shona, I see everybody's really young here. Mushandi Mai.
Yes.
Umuzi mumama. For those who don't understand Shona in Ndebele, the Bantu belief is that without mother, grandmother in the home, it's not a home. So the fact that we, under colonialism, adopted without debate, without thinking through a new mode of life, which has had many advantages for many people and many disadvantages for many people. But we now have the opportunity, and in Zimbabwe, we are in a very good place because of the president's call for unity, peace, development. We are in a good place to push for a space where we can now reorganize the society ourselves the way that we want. And we have a new program that we are doing among the women. It is to look at that Section 40, which was thrown out of the Marriages Act. Why are we looking at it as elderly women? Because I told that it came from the young women who are in small houses and who have got children with people with other homes. I think that instead of us throwing things away in Zimbabwe, we are educated enough, we are mature enough to discuss those things in the family, in the districts, everywhere. And by the time things come to the top, they have really come from the people.
Okay.
And I think there is an answer because Zimbabweans are just the most wonderful people, really kind, really, really accommodating.
All right. Now, so let's look at it from the Women's Coalition perspective. We've realized that, as she said, you know, some of these conversations are happening at the top. Some of these things are being thrown out without these discussions. Can we really change the mindsets when we start off at the beginning, when we start off in the households? And can we encourage and foster that support that women need when we look at it that way?
Thank you, Candice. I will respond to that. Just like what my Virginia and Sekai were saying, the participation of, especially when we look at young women, has cultural roots. You look at a young person like my age, we are in a family setup, and there is a meeting or whatever is happening in whatever. I'm going to contribute to that will not be heard because I'm young, they look at my age. So I think basically it really has to start within the family unit going upwards. Because the other thing, when we look at participation, we tend to look up there. But you're not looking at where it has to start. It has to start from within the family. So it really has to sink in within our families, our mothers and our fathers that we can lead, but the mentorship has to start from within the family. In Shona vanotin kana uri mwana musikana mudiki. Let me give an example. Kuti their aunties, the one who is going to be head in that family is Auntie Teteva Umbe. But we are all aunties, and maybe in some instances I might have solutions to whatever problems that are happening within the family. But because of my age, I don't have any chance. So it's the space that we need so that we can really participate and take part in. It might not be politics or whatever, but just within the family, within the church, within the community, within even my workplace. So yeah, there is more that needs to be done within the family setup, yes.
Okay. As a young woman, do you feel that if you were to express an interest in participating, let's say in as university leadership, do you feel you would get the support that you need from your family, let's say, for example?
Okay, thank you. I think that has been said by my colleague Charity, to say that the family is a primary socialization instrument. It's not giving the young women the support that they need. So it starts from the home. Once I'm being you know, I'm not getting the enough support from home, it doesn't mean I will be able to stand up even at school. So I think the problem is starting really at home as the primary socialization instrument, and it's affecting even the stages later in life.
Virginia, you want to add something?
Yeah, the family definitely is important, but I think you also have to recognize that it has to start with the self. So it starts with the women themselves, young, whatever their age is. You have to be convinced that you want to participate and that you deserve to participate and that you are the right person that the community around you is looking for. So we have moved, at least in terms of people's confidence in themselves, women's confidence in themselves. So, but we still also have a lot of women that even when everybody around them is telling them that they're good enough, do not believe that they're good enough because of the socialization that has already been talked about. So that issue of the self is very important, because one of the issues that comes up, at least where I work at the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, is that you will be asked, where are the voices that are demanding the space you're talking about? So the self, once the self has been dealt with and somebody can demand, then even us as an institution can then use that demand to then demand the duty bearers to supply whatever is being demanded. So the self is important. So we need to be able to get to a point where internally as a person, I'm convinced and I am encouraged. But then what's also important is once I've then thrown my hat in the ring, what is the environment saying back to me? Are they encouraging me or they're not encouraging me? So we have a situation where, yes, we've moved, but we are definitely not where the Constitution expects.
So that's what I also wanted to ask, that, okay, fine, I will believe in myself and I will shout it from the top of the roof and say I deserve to be in this position. But then you will find other women especially will now find reasons to attack me and say, no, she's like this and no, she's like that. How do we balance that out? How do we get past those voices? Because they do affect how you think, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah. Part of the political education that organizations like the Women's Coalition, like the organization Mama Holland is talking about, like the Zimbabwe Gender Commission is doing, is to actually get women to be able to understand that the issue of gender inequality is the background documentary has said, it's not an accident. It's a result of a systemic planned strategy that is patriarchal. Basically, that believes in male supremacy. And that system includes, it actually then also affects the socialization, where if from when you were a baby, you were told that you're not good enough. It's not just that I think I'm not good enough, but I also think she's not good enough. So one of the things that we've done is to try and say, you know what, let's deconstruct the socialization that we got. We are good enough. And really also, if we're not good enough, that's okay. There are also men that are not good enough. It's not just women. And we need to be able to still be in those spaces of governance. So at least the good thing about the legislative framework, the laws, is they do elaborate these issues. I was looking at the African Charter, democracy, elections and governance, and even our own constitution. And what it does is it really says without any ambiguity that our systems of government have to be representative. What that means is all of us need to come in with our strengths, with our weaknesses, and then we find a way of making governance representative.
All right, thank you, Virginia.
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead. Before
I
we take a short
like
break.
the way that Virginia has put things in context, but I just want to support something so that the young ones have examples, and Zimbabwe has the best examples of everything. It really has. Just in the past 18 months, I've been visited by the grandchildren of Ubaba Ndabaningi Stole. And they were talking about setting up a foundation with their mom, with their aunt. And I just thought, oh. And then 2 of them lived with us. Based on the very difficult family life they didn't have, they've set up a foundation. But the most touching thing, which is so beautiful, is that kids who then met Ubaba Ndabaningi Stole when he came back, a shattered man by the politics, have formed a Friends of Ndabaningi Stole because they heard him talk at a growth point in Gazaland. And these 2 organizations are mutually supportive. But here's the thing. I had a visitor from the Commonwealth. And the Joshua Nkomo Mqabuko, the children, invited us to Bulawayo to come with the visitor to show us the museum. Guess who turned up? The Friends of Ndabaningi Stole. Zimbabwe has a way of self-healing. And that is where the National Peace Trust calls everybody to say, we have the capacity to heal ourselves, but we need very much to allow one another to tell our stories. The family in Zimbabwe has been greatly weakened, very badly. It has got also a lot of supports. For example, most people like myself survive because of money coming from the diaspora. I don't work. But most of us elderly people, I'm dressed to the nines. It's my kids who live and work overseas and friends. And we do not look at those things as assets that people who are earning their own money still think, let me support them. So the 2 points I'm making are these, that the women's clubs in Zimbabwe were an instrument started by white women in 1908 to cope with the woman coming from home and getting lost in the colonies. So they had a skills training thing they set up. Then the African women in 1938 set this up. And up until when we came home, it was the women's clubs that were the basis of giving family support.
Mrs. Holland, allow me to stop you there because I do want to come back to that, but we do have to take a short break. So do stay tuned. We will come back and we will, of course, be talking about that very interesting topic, which is the women's clubs that you've mentioned. And it's a setup that a lot of women, especially around Africa, around Zimbabwe, have adopted. And we'll see how well that works out when we come back. Do stay tuned.
A great artist once stated, only shooting stars break the mold. But while the stars shoot at night, most of the artists sleep on their dreams. Instead of dreaming high and fighting harder, trust our dreams to stardom and let the stars gleam. Don't you think we might achieve the Zimbabwean dream? Well, fast forward, enough about the artists that trusted their dreams and let their passion pay off. Cause every day, another star was born. But will you be there to witness? Dreamstar Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's Best Talent Search competition is back. This 2019 on the 31st of August at HICC Wembo Towers, Harare from 6 p.m. till late. Come and watch as the final 17 contestants battle for the grand prize of 30,000 RTGS. For tickets, call us on 0775 775 775. Voting lines will be announced on our official Facebook page, Dreamstar Zimbabwe. Dreamstar, dream higher and fight harder. Proudly sponsored by the following.
Welcome back. We are, of course, today discussing the participation of young women in governance and leadership positions. Now, we've had a brief look where we looked at just from social standing, where are we going wrong? What do we need to correct? But now, of course, we want to take it to the leadership positions that we're talking about, leading the government, leading the societies. Now, since the Beijing Declaration of 1985, the number of women in the National Assembly has been between about 18 to 28% in Zimbabwe. Now, after the inclusion of the constitutional provision SI 124, which guarantees reserved seats for women for at least 2 terms, that percentage has, of course, gone up to 35. Now, as the Women's Coalition, do you believe that this statutory instrument was necessary? And without it, do you think we would have been able to rise through the ranks and get to those positions?
Yeah, I think as the coalition, the instrument was necessary, but also we look at issues to do with competence. That at times women we are not given the chance to prove ourselves that. Besides the instruments, we are able to lead. We can lead. It's not that you are giving us a favor. That as women you should get this portion because you are unable to. But we can lead. Besides even the statutory instrument that was implemented. And it is also important to note that the space is not really enabling for women to participate. We look at...
When you say enabling, what are some of the examples of,
yes,
the challenges that
that women... we take, for instance, from the last election, the women that were running for members of parliament post, or be it councillors post. We look at issues to do with them being attacked on social media, and the fact that I'm a woman and I want to stand in for a position, be it as an MP or a councillor. People have to look beyond me as just a human being. You start to hear questions of is she married? How many kids does she have? Or you start to hear issues of where does she come from? And just because I'm a woman. But when we look at the fellow male counterparts, such things are not brought up. So even looking at those issues, even if I want to stand in, say, in 2022, I have that that fear that what if those things start happening to me as well. So those are some of the issues that are around women and them not taking part or them not participating in governance and even development processes. And we also look at issues to do with gender. Yeah, I think it is also tied to issues to do with gender and socialization, like we have said earlier on. Yes.
Now, all right, so let me take you back to where you mentioned competence.
Yes.
So we've got this quota that needs to be filled, and there are women there. Do you feel that sometimes the respect they are granted is not what it should be, simply because people have the mentality that they were put there just to meet a number?
That's very true.
How do we change this, Virginia?
It is a perception that is there, one of the schools of thoughts that's there. But one of the things we have to recognize, and like I've said earlier, our constitution provides for some affirmative action measures that recognize that we have inequalities right now. So one of the ways that was during the constitution making process explored was the reserved seats, which is those 60 seats. And yes, for some people that may not understand, they would think that those women were just picked out from nowhere. But our understanding is that there are women that participate in their political parties and have something that they contribute to their political parties. And this is why they then made it into parliament. Unfortunately, the way it's structured, the quota system, is they're not constituency-based. So that does not also allow them an opportunity to work with the constituency, to represent the people in that constituency, because there's already somebody who was directly elected. So one finds that while it is a good thing, and we certainly appreciated the 60 seats in the last elections, because before the 60 seats, the percentage was seriously low. But the 60 seats helped us to go back to the 30s where we are. But definitely it is not a sustainable system. It is not meant to be. And the Constitution talks about 50%. It doesn't talk about reserving seats on the side, at least beyond 2023. So we need to be able to find a way to ensure that our electoral systems, our processes, the political party processes, the administrative processes support the participation of all people, including the women. Earlier on, you talked about the economic resources. They certainly help, because our political systems require one to have some resources. And a lot of the women that are competent, that are ready to come in and be part of the elections, do not do so simply because they don't commandeer enough resources. But resources by themselves are also not enough. There are other issues. The psychological torture that all contenders, male or female, go through before the elections, and then even after the elections, also discourages a lot of people. And then for women particularly, the violence takes the form of a sexual nature. And then you also have to mitigate your interests with the interests of a family, like Charity said earlier. So that just creates a situation where women are not at the same level, even if they're interested in going in. And when they are younger women, it creates a problem. I was just looking at our Constitution, and the Constitution speaks about how when there's a vacancy, so if a woman has made it into an elected post, in the event that there's a vacancy, that position is supposed to be filled by a person of the same gender. We've actually been looking at some of the by-elections that have been done, and where women have actually vacated posts, whether due to death or whether they've been appointed to higher offices. We have actually seen those posts being lost because they've gone to men. So now, it creates a problem.
Actually, so this takes me back to the question I asked earlier. Is there actual interest from women to participate, to get involved and take up these positions?
Certainly the interest is there. It can always improve, but the interest is there.
So what's stopping them?
It's also now remember I said that there is the part of the woman saying, I'm interested. And then once you say you are interested, does the environment support your interests? So we find that we then need to be able to strengthen that environmental issues. Once I'm interested, does my party support my interest? Does the family support my interest? Does the community support my interest? Does our own nation, in terms of even the policies we've adopted, when you talk about nomination, how much is required for the nomination? What is expected? And what does it mean for men and women? And when we say men and women, what does it mean for young women? Like for me, one of the things I really want to get an answer from the political parties would be, what are their succession plans? We need to be able, even in the reserved seats, to have not just women beyond a certain age, but also have women under or within the category that is considered as young, the 15 to 35 years. Is that something that our political parties are actually organizing? Okay.
Let's look at the role of organizations, for example. Now, let's say I have the support of the family and the society, and my political party has put the correct things in place, but you do have some elements that will come and will still attack me for whatever reasons, based on whatever it is that they believe. Now, what has tended to happen is, with some people, it's been left and it's okay, and oh well, it's okay. But some people, then you'll find an outcry from activists. Oh, how dare you? And why are we not approaching this from a uniform position and saying, if it's, as long as it's a woman, we are not allowing anybody to attack her in such a manner?
Can I just bring two small points? The first one is that young women in politics, the environment we have in Zimbabwe is one where the violence now is no longer just confined to ZANU-PF. And tragically, in the opposition, even women are now involved in abductions, in torture, and things like that, information which is hidden. And I'm saying that we need, as Zimbabweans, to actually be truthful about how do we stop all forms of violence in all spaces. Unless Zimbabweans come together and are honest and get this done, the situation we are in is one that is taking us on a very dangerous path. Number two, what makes Zimbabweans the way they are, if you look at the people who are abducting and torturing, they are people who've been badly tortured themselves. So we are going through a period of self-harm, which is a very well-known condition of people who've been tortured. That is why the National Peace Trust is engaging international players with technical expertise to intervene with civil society organizations, with government, with everything that is there now to get us out of the self-harm condition, which people are not even talking about today. Those are the two things I'm saying, that we need to get the issue of violence for all of us, not just the young, dealt with. And there are ways of dealing with it. Number two, we need to accept that our history, since Cecil John Rhodes came here, has been that of very big violence, authority after authority. And the people here, all Zimbabweans, all of them, all of us need psycho-social support and care. And in our National Peace Trust, in the Great Zimbabwe Peace Building Initiative, we have got structures that go right up to the village for those things to take place. Because once again, Zimbabweans traditionally have the best psychosocial support and care systems. And if these are put in with Western ones, Zimbabwe will be the place where everybody comes. So these are the things that Zimbabweans don't want to talk about, which we are putting on the table.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Wall. Now, Ruimbo, let's say that you wake up and you decide you want to run for MP. Do you feel safe as a young woman in the current environment to declare your ambition and to run?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I can feel safe, but I would like to talk this along the lines of Student Representative Council. Maybe if I woke up and become an aspiring SRC president, maybe for USAID or for NAST or ETC. I think, within myself, I may be confident enough. But however, we are going back to those entrances that we are lacking support, maybe from my fellows, maybe from my male students, counterparts. There is an issue of discrimination, prejudices, stereotyping. But in as much as I would like to participate in governance and leadership, maybe at local or at national level, the support is not yet there. Yeah, from my perspective, the support is not yet there.
Excuse me, the program of the girl child in Africa, I think you must remove this from your head, there's no support, has been one of the most brilliant programs in the world.
Yes.
The mentality in Zimbabwe is to be given. Kubatsirwa. I really want to say this to you. When you leave the studios today and you go home, look in the streets. The women are working purposefully. The young men are lying in the streets. It's terrible. And we need to start to open our eyes and see what's going on. Now, we were given by MSU, I'm a co-patron there, a young intern to take for a year. This is a true story. She came, she stayed with us for a year, she saved $85. She said, after staying in this house, I want to be the first MSU SRC president. I said, with $85? She said, yes. She ran her campaign. The two political parties crashed into her, trashed her. She won.
All right.
She demonstrates for me the point about that. All the cries that we make, we are not looking at what has been afforded us. We should look more at what there is. And the issue that needs to be dealt with by men and women in Zimbabwe is that of violence. And the violence is because we are self-harming don't ignore that point, because we need to deal with it.
All right. So,
you had asked a question about initiatives.
Yes.
Initiatives that are being done. And there are definitely a lot of initiatives. I know that the Women's Coalition has got the Section 56 campaign. She'll speak about it. But definitely there are campaigns. But maybe before I get to the campaigns, I would just want to say, definitely Mama Holland was right in that we should disabuse ourselves as women of the idea that power will be handed over. Because the nature of power is that it is not handed over. We have to take. So this is why I talked about you need to demand. And then having demanded, you need to then strategize how you can actually get the power. And so you find that as the Zimbabwe Gender Commission, we were hoping that in the 2018 elections, we would actually see incremental value in terms of the representation of women, not just at national level, but also at local level. Sadly, it did not happen. But we do not give up, because we also recognize that this is social transformation.
Do you know why it didn't happen?
I think some of the issues we've already talked about are the reasons why. But I also believe that, you know, when you have a system of governance, national system of governance, and then there is a change to that national system of governance, the leadership, one finds that in terms of the national priorities, there is a difference. Because as we have been talking now about the national vision, and talking also about priorities for rebuilding our nation, there may be a feeling sometimes that gender issues are not a priority. But we are here to say that is not true, because there's no way you can actually build a nation. There's no way you can even go to an upper middle economy income by 2035 without taking on board a lot of the people that make up that economy. So I just say that it's a perception, because we were looking now at the political changes that happened, and as we come together as a country and we want to move forward, you then see that sometimes there's a reconstitution of priorities. And as the Gender Commission, we recognize that. And we then also started a campaign of just monitoring what was happening, and the issues that have already been mentioned were there. We saw them. But we then said that we need to learn a lesson from the 2018 elections and prepare for 2023.
Yes.
In fact, even prepare for 2028. And part of what that means is we need to be able to do the mentoring that has already been talked about. Identify those women that are ready, regardless of how difficult it is, and work with them to ensure that even when they feel discouraged, they know that there's a body. And when I'm saying body, it's not just the Gender Commission, it's all those working in this space that says we'll walk the path with you. It's also looking at who are the opinion leaders within the governance space, formal and informal. So we've also been engaging with them. We've also been facilitating spaces just to discuss. Are we talking about quota as affirmative action, so small bits that we give as a way of moving towards what we are looking for, which is the equal representation, or we need to really say, let's keep the result in sight. The 50% is what we are looking at. We are also saying we need to be able to go and engage with the women themselves. Because again, as we are talking, the gender issue is one thing that unites us, but it's not the only one. So you find as we sit here, people are from different persuasions, religious, political, ethnic, or whatever it is. So sometimes if you don't then get to a point where as a group you say, yes, we may have all these differences, but what is that one thing that unites us? And right now, the one thing that unites us is that we don't have the equality that the Constitution has promised us.
All right, let me pause you there as we take a short break. When we do come back, we will, of course, continue the discussion, and we will be taking in some of your feedback. So if you have not already posted your questions, already posted your comments, the platforms to use: Facebook, Zim Papers TV Network, and Twitter at ZTN News. Now, remember, this broadcast is brought to you live by Zim Papers TV Network in partnership with the Women's Coalition. We will be back shortly. Do stay tuned.
A great artist once stated, only shooting stars break the mold. But while the stars shoot at night, most of the artists sleep on their dreams. Instead of dreaming high and fighting harder, trust our dreams to stardom and let the stars gleam. Don't you think we might achieve the Zimbabwean dream? Well, fast forward, enough about the artists that trusted their dreams and let their passion pay off. Cause every day, another star was born. But will you be there to witness? Dreamstar Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe's Best Talent Search competition is back this 2019 on the 31st of August at HICC Wembo Towers, Harare from 6 p.m. till late. Come and watch as the final 17 contestants battle for the grand prize of 30,000 RTGS. For tickets, call us on 0775 775 775. Voting lines will be announced on our official Facebook page, Dreamstar Zimbabwe. Dreamstar, dream higher and fight harder. Proudly sponsored by the following.
Welcome back, and of course we are continuing our discussion on all things women empowerment, women equality, and participation in issues to do with governance and leadership. Now, Charity, I understand the Women's Coalition have a campaign that's running. Before we then start dissecting it, maybe you could just give us a brief about what it is.
Okay, thank you, Candice. As the Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe, we've been running the hashtag Section 56 campaign, as it is inscribed in the Constitution of Zimbabwe that there is need to have gender equality in all spheres of life, and both in private and public sector, so as to bridge the gap that is being there between women and men. So we are advocating for equality in social, political, and economic spheres of our lives.
Ruimbo, do you feel, how do I put this? Now, there's so many calls for gender equality and this and that, and something that has been mentioned, and quite rightfully, is sometimes you need to stop asking for and going to take. Are we taking what we deserve? Are we demanding that right to be equal? Are we proving that we actually deserve it, or are we just waiting for handouts?
Okay, thank you, Candice. Yeah, we, as female students, we are really demanding. I can give an example, like currently at Belvedere Teachers College, we have a female president, like Mama Holland was saying. It's very possible, and as a network that works with female students, we are carrying out capacity building trainings for female student leaders, or female students aspiring to be leaders, maybe in SRC bodies. And we are also targeting Section 56 and 8 of the Constitution to prepare them, because we see leadership in students' bodies as a preparation of our tomorrow's leaders, maybe at national level. So yeah, that's some of the work that we are really doing, and of course with clear examples of female students who are trying to aspire those higher positions in leadership bodies.
All right. Now, just a quick contribution here from Carol Washe online. She says, a male president, 2 male vice presidents, and yet we have more women statistically. And then this is her opinion. Problem is, we are being involved in bedroom affairs more than anything. Charity.
Okay. We are being involved in...
Maybe while Charity is thinking, I can come in.
All right.
I also want to say
bedroom affairs. Bedroom affairs have 2 people.
Yes.
If we're going to go to the bedroom, you are not going to have the same sex in that bed. Okay, maybe you have, but the bedroom affairs involve men and women. So if the caller or the one who has posted is wanting to talk about the issues of the extramarital and everything else, that involves both men and women. So respectfully, that is not an issue necessarily.
Can I say to that?
Yes.
I think the problem we have in Zimbabwe is that we know what the problems are, but there is no platform we have created for ourselves where there are spaces where we feel safe and secure to say what's in our mind. When I first came home from Australia in 1980, the term was bottom power. And I didn't know what that was. Then when I found out what it was, I found that in fact, it was up to the women to organize themselves and get rid of that phenomenon. Well, the women didn't. So it has to do with that. The issues themselves are being defined very brilliantly. Women in politics and peace building are part of the peace and politics. There are two clusters in the Women's Coalition. The people who come there think a lot of things through. There are 3 places where women discuss these things: Kuchikoro, in the women's clubs, and in the churches. I'm in a Bible study group for our suburb. The things we discuss there are so empowering. Yeah. These are the forums that we need to multiply because they are also very healing. The issues are there, they are very bad, but they need for us, this thing of that, what are we demanding? What are we, it's also not the correct way to frame things. If you go to your home, nobody demands. Plates are put on the table, food is dished, you eat, jasara, if it's finished, it's finished. There's no demand. If we could take that African mentality of how we share things and how we do things into the public sphere, this would be heaven. That's really the thought I want people to have. Could we lead to change our language? The instruments for equity and equilibrium and balance are in front of us in Zimbabwe. They are everywhere. But somehow we are blinded into seeing what they are and to pick and to use.
Virginia.
Yeah, I was just thinking bedroom affairs, and then maybe we were unfair, or I was unfair to the person who wrote. Maybe what we should have said is, what does she mean? But really, for me, it's a she. For me, and I also got a bit confused along the way, where I'm thinking she started off talking about the presidium, and then she went to the bedroom affairs. And
perhaps
not
she was
sure what
then
the link
pointing out
is.
the issue of priorities, as you had mentioned earlier,
Okay.
that while these ones are focusing on this, maybe this is where most women will have their focus. I'm also not too... trying to assume this is what she meant. But maybe if we try and dissect it from that angle.
Maybe we can. Okay, now we can come back and dissect it. Three men in the presidium. This is exactly the point I was saying, that as you then want to reconfigure a governance system, there may be a feeling that you need to have the kind of people you feel are really capable. And I'm not at all saying that this is the right approach, or this is what inspired us to have 3 men in a presidium, rather than actually having representation of women at that level. It's another thing, though. But what is important, and the questions have been raised, the issue of our presidium now being made up of men has been raised and continues to be raised. Earlier on, you asked the question about when people are complaining about violations, they will complain and they will talk about this one and that one. I think the challenge that we've had in the movement, in the gender equality, or in any movement, is to want to only listen to campaigns or movements when they put a name to the issues. Let me give you an example. When you look at the Women's Coalition's messages, when you look at the Zimbabwe Gender Commission's messages, I'm sure even the messages that they put out, the principles are usually clearly enunciated. That we need to have gender equality, we need to have respect for women and men, we need to also say no to violence against women, we need to do this and that. Unfortunately, in our kind of governance system, if a woman from this particular side of our governance system is beaten up, and there is need to actually highlight that issue. Unfortunately, we also have, and I know Mama Holland is saying we shouldn't just complain, but before we can talk about the solutions, we need to also say what is it that is wrong. For you to be able to do an analysis in Zimbabwe, if unfortunately your analysis or your position converges with a certain political party, you are then dismissed as being of that political party, rather than to be able to say, if we are saying, as the Zimbabwe Gender Commission did last year, the issue of cyberbullying is not acceptable, and it has now happened to this person. And we recognize that it happens to a lot of women, and it should stop. You then find, as an institution or even as an individual, you are taken to task for being aligned to that person. Yet the issue we're talking about is the cyberbullying.
And
you were
important
giving an
issue, but it's
example.
ignored.
Yeah. So for me, one of the recommendations from here would be to say, if people are not convinced about what the women's movement or gender equality movement is calling for, they must just go back to what the Constitution is saying, because a lot of what's in the Constitution came from the movement. They must also listen to the messages outside of having something that has happened on that particular day. And they'll actually see that the issues of equal representation, the issue of gender equality, the issues of saying we need to be able to ensure that our young women are also involved, they have the space, are always talked about. So we need to be able to recognize, I think it was a point that was said earlier, that the demand for space, and demanding is right. Because unfortunately, while we have our Ubuntu as a people, somehow when we come into the political space, it appears that some of the values we use at our household and family, at our community level, are put aside. And there have been some people that have said, yes, because politics is a dirty game. It may be a dirty game, but it doesn't have to be a dirty game. It should actually be strengthened by some of those values that we have as a country.
All right. Mrs. Holland, before you then respond to that, I also want you to then very briefly go into your recommendations going forward on the issue of acquiring gender balance, especially in positions of power.
That's exactly what I want to talk to.
On that.
Kuti, during the inclusive government, there was gender balance everywhere. How did Maimujuru get removed? It was women who planned that and got her out. Please let us not forget that within her own party. Number two, right now, there are women that are organized to trash women that have gone to the top in politics. Have I heard anybody try to protect those women? No. So to the young women, the recommendation I have is that it's really important for your organization to state what the problems are. Virginia, when I say people complain, please allow me to say that. Problem statement and then analysis is different to when we are given a platform like this. Now for me, you really have to take this opportunity, state what the problems, the challenges are. Because people like us, people like her, people in the Women's Coalition, we are there to respond to those and strengthen them. And we are not just going to link you to people in here. We have really come up with a strategy in the National Peace Trust to bring the international community into Zimbabwe and to see for themselves what the challenges are and to help us get out of the self-harm. So the self-harm, people understand all the violence that's happening is because of the cyclic political violence that we've had.
Thank you, Mrs. Holland. Ruvimbo, your recommendations as we conclude today's program.
Okay, my recommendation may just link with Madam Holland's one, but I can say thank you for that correction.
That Madam, which the men throw at me all the time when they are putting me down.
Okay,
thank you for that correction. I think it's in line with what she was saying, and I also think that there's need for confidence building and capacity building in our young women and for us as young women, so that we can get the right direction.
Thank you very much. Charity, I want your recommendations, but I also want you to tell us how everybody can become involved in #Section 56.
Okay, so as the Women's Coalition, basically our recommendations around promoting participation of especially young women into governance processes is to the political leaders or to the leaders in general to have that will to promote gender responsive governance processes within their organizations. And we also want to continue advocating for the implementation of #Section 56. If you want to be involved in the campaign, we are on Facebook, the Women's Coalition, and we are also a membership-based. You can come and join us and be a member. We are on Twitter at Women's Coalition of Zimbabwe. We also accept your feedback, and your interaction is also quite important for you to be part of the campaign.
All right. Thank you, Charity.
Yeah.
Virginia.
In doing recommendations, I'm just going to talk about the role of the Gender Commission, because that is one of the recommendations. This is how we're actually dealing with the issues of gender inequality.
Yes.
So as an institution, part of our function is to monitor issues of gender equality. What are the trends? What is happening? Are we moving forward, or are we moving we're moving back? So the issue of monitoring is very important to be able to know whether there is loss of traction and what needs to be done. It's also to recommend to public and private institutions ways in which they can mainstream gender and address those reasons why we're actually having the inequality persisting. It's also to investigate and really address the cases of violations, blatant violations, because as we have already outlined, there are reasons why women, young and mature, are not participating at the level that we would want them to participate. So as a country, we need to be able to use what's already outlined in our constitution and actually use that to ensure that we are moving towards reaching the target of the constitution, which is 50% representation, meaning that when we've gotten that right, we're going to have women across different ages being represented at the national level, at the local level, and also within the other institutions, whether it's within the education sector, within the economy, within politics and decision making, within the ministries, within the churches.
Yes.
We need to be able to get to a point where in all those spaces our cultural values are actually supporting the inclusion of women, the inclusion of men, the inclusion of young women, the inclusion of young men.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, thank you all for joining us today for this discussion, and thank you for joining us online and contributing. We do have a few contributions that I didn't read out from Lucy, Carol, Charlene. Thank you all for those contributions. They will be noted and will be, of course, taken into account. Yes? Thank you for joining us today. My name is Candice. I have been your host, and we will see you next time.